Educators Lead, episode 125.
So as a leader, being able to provide that space, provide that window of time for a teacher to understand the why and really get into it, I think would help a lot of different scenarios.
Welcome to Educators Lead, where we interview leaders in education to offer inspiration and practical advice to help launch educators into the next level of leadership. I'm your host, Jay Willis, and I want to thank you for subscribing to our show.
This is John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and you're listening to Educators Lead. Let's join my friend Jay Willis and get ready to take your leadership to the next level.
Hello, EduLeaders. Jay Willis here, and I'm excited to introduce our featured guest today. Joining me for a second time, John Stevens. John, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do this.
All right, John is an instructional coach in Southern California who's interested in blending the world of taking risks, math, technology, 3D printing, and parent support. He blogs about it all at fishing4tech, that's the number 4tech.com, runs a website built on conversations at wouldyourathermath.com, and is the author of Table Talk Math and The Classroom Chef. So that's just a brief introduction, John, but tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jay. I am an instructional technology coach down here in Southern California, and I was in the math classroom for 7.5 years, and just all the things that you mentioned have started to make their way onto my plate, and, the 3D printing side of things and taking risks and doing things a little bit differently in the math classroom has spilled over into my regular job now, which is the coaching side of things. And now as a father of 2 boys, I'm learning about the joys of parenting, and as my kids become school aged, learning how to support them in their education and trying to find that balance between the play side of things and the learning side of things, and trying to blend those together as well.
Right. Yeah. It makes things a lot more applicable when you have your own kids.
Yeah.
For sure.
Little test subjects, I guess.
Yeah. Little test tubes. Yeah. So what ages are your boys?
They are 6 going on 7 and 4.
Okay. We have a 10-year-old, just soon to be 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. So
okay.
Keeps life fun.
Yeah, it does.
Well,
Busy.
so you are, as I mentioned right before we started your intro, you're actually the first guest ever to join me on Educators Lead for a second time. I feel like we should have like a special award for that or something. But for now, it's just going to be bragging rights. I'll take it.
It was fun being on in episode 97, and I'm looking forward to being back on again.
Yeah. And so for listeners, if you want to go back and listen to episode 97, you can, of course, hear more from John after you have listened to this episode. So, but for those people who never had a chance to listen to episode 97, and for, they may not be familiar with your story, if you don't mind, maybe start from the beginning and talk about how you got to where you are today. Maybe even, once you graduated from college to now, what's happened?
Wow. So I graduated from college with a degree in mathematics, and I wanted to play baseball. And when that didn't happen, injuries and just things that took life into a different course, I was going to go to like Raytheon, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, do a bunch of like algorithm work and really apply the math that I was learning at the upper levels, and took an interview with a school district out in Palm Springs, and it was the right thing to do. It was a really good conversation, and I could see that I would have the opportunity to make an impact. And, when I was going into college and through college, teaching was never really an option because I didn't want to do the same thing the same way 5 times a day, 180 times a year for 30 years. And that was what stuck in my mind. Like, there's no way I want to be a teacher. And when I took the position, I took that mentality in with me. And if I'm going to make it through this career, I cannot do the same thing the same way 5 times a day, 180 times a year for 30 years. So just trying to find different ways of bringing in not necessarily the real world math, but bringing in things that are engaging, that are fun, that make kids curious, that support the opportunity for them to take risks. And I started that at the middle school level. I taught at the middle school level for 7 years, teaching engineering, robotics, and design. I taught basic 8th grade math. I taught the gifted and talented classes, Algebra 1, and had the opportunity to interview for a high school position and got that job out at Alta Loma High School in Southern California, where I was there for a semester teaching geometry. Once again, more opportunities to take some risks with technology and just do some things a little bit differently than I had done before, and got an opportunity again to apply for a job as an instructional technology coach, jumped on that, and I've been there ever since. And I support now 1,100 teachers, 24,500 students, and 8 comprehensive high schools.
Wow. Yeah. So that's got to keep you pretty busy.
Yeah. It's kind of one of those things where, I talk about originally how I didn't want to be bored and do the same thing over and over again. And that is certainly not the case with what I'm doing and where I'm at right now. We're in the middle of a giant Chromebook rollout, working on the 3rd phase of it. We're not quite 1-to-1, but we're going in phases. So I'm on the team that's coordinating the rollout and support of a whole bunch of Chromebooks.
Well, so, with that as kind of your mission, your true north, making sure that you weren't just, 5 days times however long, just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. What do you do to snap yourself out of it when you find yourself kind of just going through the motions?
Well, it's a good thing you mentioned that, because there are those days. I wish I would have said I did things differently every day for all the years that I was in the classroom and even now, but we do as educators, as human beings, we find ourselves getting into ruts, and where the norm or the safer space to be is where it's not taking bigger risks. And for me, it was looking out and thinking, okay, I've got this unit coming up. What can I do differently? And how can I take a look at this from a different perspective? We did a lesson towards the end of the year. It was a geometry project, and it was geometry art, which is fun for me because I like geometry. For the kids, it was kind of this pseudo context where it's like, yeah, we're just finding the area of a bunch of shapes and putting it into a picture. Not really that cool. So I got in touch with our district art liaison, and she brought in 3 artists. We brought in gesso boards, which are little 3-inch by 3-inch squares, and we had the kids paint their designs on these gesso boards, and ended up taking it and putting it on as a mural on the wall in our gymnasium. So just finding those opportunities to say, you know what, this is one of those times where I can take a risk, and being willing to ask people for help and not being afraid of hearing the word no, because that's the worst thing that they're going to say.
Yeah, being willing to take a risk. And something else you said in there, I have found as I've gotten older, as a parent, as a spouse, in everything that I do, that the importance of being proactive and intentional.
Sure. And if you're not going to advocate for yourself, for your students, for your children, nobody will. So for me, it was a matter of necessity, because if I'm not going to say anything about it, it's going to be the same way. It's going to be done the same way that it always has been. And I had to be willing to, again, take that risk and have the potential of falling flat on my face, and having somebody kind of wreck my lesson plan or my preparation for something that I really wanted to do. But I found, by and large, people were supportive of new and innovative ideas, whether it's at the school site with leadership, or whether it's out in the community, whether it's with kids. People are willing to try things, and we just have to be able to be given that opportunity and that platform to do so.
Right. Well, how do you overcome those who are skeptics or resistant to that?
Prove it. I mean, for me, it was going out and just doing it, and being able to present a body of work that says, look, this is proven to work based on what I've done here. And it's also been great because in the role that I'm in now, I can be there side by side and hey, I'm not going to let you go through this alone if you don't want to. I'm more than happy, more than willing to make those phone calls with you, not for you, but with you, and guide you along this process so that you are going to have that experience that you want to have.
Wow, that's great. Well, so usually, about this point, I ask you to tell something interesting about yourself, but I'm going to actually hijack that and jump in and ask something interesting about yourself that I really want to learn more about. And that would be 3D printing. So I was actually yesterday getting some new tires for our minivan. Yes, I have arrived. I know it's a status symbol for all men. They're all yearning to get that minivan. And then it's like, yes, now, my life is complete. So anyway, I was getting some new tires on my minivan. And while I was there, they had this little car, it was white, this little car sitting on top of the desk there. And I picked it up and I was like, what is this? And they said, oh, that was printed with a 3D printer. And I was amazed at just the intricate detail on this little car and just how impressive it was. So tell me more about 3D printing. How did you get started with that? That's
a very good question. I was first contacted by a teacher out in my alma mater, outside of Las Vegas, Nevada. And he was like, I want to get a 3D printer. Do you know anybody who has one? Because my principal, whom I also know, wants to justify it. Like, we can't just buy a 3D printer. And like, no, but I can learn about it. And so he ended up getting me in touch with the owner of a company called Airwolf 3D. And I had some good interactions with them. And they said, well, we were looking for somebody to write lesson plans for us. Would you be interested? Sure. I'd love to write lesson plans for a 3D printing program. The only problem is that I have never done any 3D printing. I just know how to write lesson plans for math, and I have some ideas. So we ended up working something out to where I get the opportunity to have a 3D printer, and I write lesson plans for Airwolf 3D.
So how do you think, or how would you envision, I guess, the future of 3D printing? How would you see that contributing to the education process?
Well, from a high school perspective, taking it all the way up to calculus, and there's a famous problem in calculus called the draining tank problem, where you have a tank full of water and you're supposed to determine how long it takes to drain. And it's very prescribed. In this case, I could have students design their own tank, print a tank, fill it with water, and then test their calculations to say, yes, it did take 42.6 seconds to drain the tank based on the calculus that I have already done. And it provides that connection with how calculus can be applied. Whereas a lot of the calculus that we do right now is more theoretical than it is applicable because it's hard to apply variations. We can only do this one problem with this one thing that we have. Well, now we can create our own. There's revolutions about an axis where I can take something, spin it around and print it out and show it to kids. Like, this is what this looks like. The thing that you used to do on your paper, I can now do on a printer. Taking it all the way down to first grade, I can have students print their own Cuisenaire rods and print their own units, print fractions. I can have students in the middle school level create scale models of things, kind of like that car that you were talking about, and as much detail as they would want, or as you as the instructor would set out. How much detail needs to be in there? How precise does it need to be? So there are things that we can do as educators to incorporate 3D printing, and it still is somewhat of a novelty. It is still somewhat of a new thing that's out there, and a lot of people are uncertain. Like, I know that it's cool. I know that I want it, but I don't know why that I want it, and I don't know how I can justify it to my administrator for him or her to invest in this for me and with my students.
Yeah, it's just such a young thing, and I see that there's so much potential for it. Like, I think there was I think maybe he was 15 or so, and he did an open source where he just shared with everybody how he printed a prosthetic arm or something, like a robotic arm, and it was incredible. Yeah, and that incredible is a great way of putting it. I was up in Central California a couple of years ago, and
there was a high school group who had printed a prosthetic arm for, I think, a teacher who had lost his arm due to an illness, or lost his hand due to an illness. And so they reprinted using guitar strings for the ligaments, and then the fingers were 3D printed. And the teacher was saying that this is stuff that people are doing at UCLA.
Wow.
And elsewhere, I'm sure, but he had a connection to UCLA. I mean, you've got high school kids who are doing the work of college graduate students. And the tools and the resources that we have available to us now. I mean, there's a printer, a company called New Matter, has a printer out for $300. You can go and you can get into 3D printing for less than a computer. In some cases, less than a Chromebook, definitely less than an iPad. I mean, it's becoming more accessible for the regular consumer to be able to have one in their garage or their extra bedroom or their kid's bedroom and say, here's the 3D printer. Let's make something amazing today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing kind of how that, what all opportunities that's going to open up the door to in the future.
Sure.
So I want to spend some time really talking about your book and digging into that. So tell us about this book. You just published it April 3rd. Is that right?
Yes.
So, and the book is called Talk Math, a practical guide for bringing math into everyday conversations. So tell me, where did the inspiration for that book start? And then what would be maybe some of the takeaways for educational leaders?
So Table Talk Math was started because I was at a conference and all these teachers were talking about new and innovative ways and dynamic ways of having conversations in the classroom and working with students to improve their math fluency. It's like, this is great. And then I've been going to conferences for years, and I've been presenting at conferences for years. I've done workshops for years. And I was thinking, with this new-ish hat on, hey, what are we doing for parents? And how are we supporting parents in this journey of supporting their children? We've got a lot of parents, I would say the vast majority, all but a few, really actively are engaged in their children's lives and want to support them with understanding content. And, we want what's best for our kids as parents. And so I felt like it was one of those things where parents want to help. They just may not know how. And they may not know where to look. So I wanted to write something that was designed to be a quick read. It was designed to be written in a language that is easily understandable. It's more conversational. It's not thick with research, although I do cite Dr. Jo Boaler and some of the things that she's done. I've brought in Andrew Stedell to talk about Estimation 180. I've brought in Fawn Wynn to talk about visual patterns, Mary Barassa to talk about which one doesn't belong, Nat Banting to talk about fraction talks, and Annie Fetter to talk about noticing and wondering. So 5 experts in the field to be able to talk about what these resources are and how they can be applied in the home, and also, easily translatable to the classroom. But really, it's not a book for teachers per se. It's more of parents and guardians to sit down with their kids and have more math-based conversations at home.
Well, and so what do you think, as far as for educational leaders who are kind of listening, what would be maybe some of the takeaways that they could apply to their schools?
I think it's the opportunity to build a strong support system for our parents. And, we send a newsletter home, or we send home updates. At the same time, we're not really sending home, here's an idea that you can try with your child, with your children, to be able to push them along. As a parent, I want to do what's best for my kids. And my son's in first grade. I'm a math major. I was a math teacher. I'm a lover of math. I speak about math. I don't know the best way to help my first grader developmentally understand his math. And that was kind of the epiphany in it all. I wish that the educational leaders, I wish that the teachers would send something home saying, hey, try this with your child. Instead of, here's their math packet, parents, please help your kids. Right now it's easy. It's basic addition, some subtraction. as my sons get older, that math is going to get harder, and it's going to get more and more complicated for the parent, more and more difficult for the parent to sit down at the table, have those math-based conversations. So it was more of that, being able to find ways for the teachers and the leaders to help the parents who want to help their kids.
So I guess in your own personal journey, what inspired your love for math?
It definitely didn't hurt that my parents are both engineers, but I think what helped it was my parents, and I talk about this in the book, is my parents not shying away from math-based conversations and being intentional about having them. One of the stories in the book, we, as kids, so we grew up in Nevada, and my family lives in Michigan. And so we would take drives every summer out to Michigan, and those drives were boring. It's a 2-day drive. Both parents are trading off driving. And here my brother and I are sitting in the back, just trying not to get in trouble. And you can only play I Spy for so long. You can only play the license plate game where you're trying to find license plates from different states for so long. And so my mom and dad would give us some brain teasers and some challenges. And one of them that I remember and I talk about in the book is my mom saying, okay, I'm going to start at a number. And let's say the number was 19, and we're going to count up by sixes. Ready, go. And we would go around, and my dad would play the bad kid quite well, and he would get the number wrong, and we would call him on it. And it was this fun game, but it was all rooted in helping us understand mathematics better. And I think that we played a lot of games together, a lot of board games. We didn't have a movie theater in our town, so there wasn't a whole lot to do. We didn't have a whole lot of money growing up, so there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity to go out and do things. So we played a lot of board games, and we had a lot of family time to sit down and be intentional about building that relationship with each other.
Yeah. So I guess with parents as engineers and with such a math focus, then did you figure out a way to make sure that you had the center line for which half of the car was your brother's half and which was your half? Like, did you have that very clearly marked?
Yes, sometimes literally, but yeah, always figuratively. And my parents helped referee the overstepping of the line.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing that now as a father of 2 boys, like apologizing to my parents for any potential wrongdoings in the past.
Yeah, that's funny. So I guess, how do you integrate math into your own children's lives with your boys? How do you kind of incorporate it on a daily basis, make it fun? And, what are some things that you do?
Some of them are in the book, and some of them are detailed in there with different websites that I talk about. For example, Fawn Wynn is a Southern California math teacher, and she built a website called visualpatterns.org. And, I'll put out a first step, a second step, and a third step, and say, okay, boys, I want you to build me what the 4th step looks like. And whether my son is 4 or, my younger 4-year-old or my older 6-year-old, they're going to do it in different ways, but they're still going to get to the right answer. And it's about building that structure and modeling their way up. We'll do a lot of estimations. How many jelly beans do you think are in this bowl? It's a timely thing to talk about with Easter and grandparents that spoil the heck out of them. How much candy do you think is here? Being able to have those just off the cuff conversations that they don't feel like, oh, we're sitting down and doing math time. Thanks, Dad. It's just one of those things that comes up like, I wonder how far it is from here to that tree. What do you think? And it makes it to where it's a safe entry point for my kids. They don't feel like I don't know is an acceptable answer. They feel like they can give me something that I can build off with them.
Well, and so what, I noticed that you had some co-collaborators on your book.
Yeah.
So who are, I guess, how was it? How did you come to kind of know and work with them? And then how did they help contribute to it?
coming to know and working with them is through Twitter. I've got a really strong group of people that I lean on heavily for new ideas and support, collaboration. If you're on Twitter, you can search the hashtag MTBOS, stands for the Math Twitter Blogosphere. It started out as a pretty small group and has grown quite exponentially to, I don't even know how many people are associated with it, but a lot of people congregate around that hashtag and share ideas and bounce things off of each other. They blog about their learning. They blog about the struggle and the failures that they have so that we can all learn from them and with them. And these 5 folks are 5 people whom I have such respect for. And when I was starting to write the book, I wanted to be able to share some ideas from my time as a child, my time as a father, my time as an educator, but I didn't want to come across as the expert in the matter. So I leaned on them and asked them to contribute a vignette per se for that chapter. So the 5 people that I mentioned, Andrew, Fawn, Nat, Annie, and Mary, have all offered up their perspectives for the things that they are noted for, and trying to offer up parents a new idea based on their time as a parent or their time as an educator and how they're applying that resource in their own world.
Well, and I feel like the release date of this book is great. A lot of times parents are kind of looking for extra resources to use with their children over the summer, and life just gets really busy and it doesn't happen. And just, coming up with things on your own, it's sometimes kind of daunting trying to figure out what to do. So, in what ways do you think a parent could use this book over the summer to kind of make for some fun summer activities and to help their children kind of retain what they learned during the school year and maybe even build on it?
Yeah, that's a great question. One way is there's actually been 3 principals who have purchased sets of the books for their parent communities, and they're going to be giving them out to the parents before the end of the school year. And one of them in particular is going to be having a book study with parents in the fall around the ideas from the book. And so really bringing parents in, and I don't know if it's going to be through email or possibly Google Classroom or how he's going to be setting it up, but he's going to be very intentional about not just sending out the book, but following up with it and trying to support parents by building that community within the school setting. So that was one of the ways that I really liked and that I'm certainly an advocate for. Another one, somebody reached out on Twitter, how do you recommend reading the book? And it might seem like a rhetorical question, but my answer to her was 1 chapter at a time slowly and put it down. Sure, it's a quick read. You could probably get through it in a day, maybe 2, but read a chapter and then try some of those things. Go on to fractiontalks.com and see what's on there and try to build, print something out or look at it on the computer with your child and see like, hey, let's figure out how much of this is shaded black. So, going through it and being intentional about what you use from that book rather than I read it, I'm good, let's move on. Let's read it in chunks and try some of those things. And then I'm available. All of the people who contributed are available. They all have their Twitter handles on there. People can reach out to me and be able to bounce ideas off of me. I'd be more than happy to do that because it also benefits my own children as I can take their ideas and relay it onto my kids as well.
Yeah, I feel like there's a huge gap between knowledge and application, right? Like you can have, you can read a book and then just put it down. And, oh, that was a good book. And then just kind of go about your life and it doesn't really have any effect long-term. But then I feel like the advice that you're giving here is just so valuable. Read a chapter, put it down and go actually apply some of the things that you just read about.
Yeah. And a good friend of mine, Jeff Kroll, he lives in Colorado. He actually built a summer board for his kids. And he's a math teacher and he's pretty involved in the math Twitter blogosphere, like I've mentioned earlier, but he has a schedule built out for his kids where, every Monday we're going to do estimations and Wednesday we're going to do would you rathers. And, he was he was very good about scheduling things out. And so that way there was variety. We're not always going to do the same type of task, but more than that, I was driving behind a semi a couple weeks ago, and on the semi there were stacked up a whole bunch of pipes, and it was really nice. It was a nice array of pipes. And I asked the boys in the back, how many pipes do you think are on the truck? And just one of those, pop-up conversations that, yes, I could have just turned the radio up and, trudged through the traffic as we go to baseball practice, but I saw an opportunity and I took advantage of it. How many pipes do you think are on that? My wife gets involved. I get involved. My 4-year-old says a million. My 6-year-old starts to actually count them out. And we have a good conversation about that. It doesn't have to be with the book in hand, sitting down at the table. These conversations can come up pretty much anywhere, as long as they happen naturally and as long as they happen with the child.
Right. Yeah. I would feel like one of the takeaways as a parent or as an educator is just more looking for opportunities, seeing those opportunities to talk about math in daily life.
Yeah, we are busy people, and I say that very generically. My wife and I are both working full time, and both boys are playing Little League, which is chewing up every minute of our day. And when you really sit down and think about it, you get a very limited amount of time with your children every day. And, technology and the way that the speed of the world, it's a very busy world. It's very easy to get caught up in bringing work home. And both my wife and I have had to be really direct with each other and aware of how much time we are spending actively engaged with our children. And this book and the ideas in there are some ways to be able to set things aside and focus on the family. And, whether it's sitting down and having dinner with your kids. And I know that for a lot of people, that's just not an option because of the schedules. But anytime that you do have with them, being present, and not just being present, but being actively present in their lives and their development.
Yeah, I love the fact that this book encourages those deeper relationships with our kids and encourages you to have meaningful conversation. I know obviously it can help improve their math skills and critical thinking ability, but more importantly, these conversations can kind of provide a time to connect in a meaningful way with your child. How do you think that connection and relationship helps a child become more open to learning, especially with a subject like math that isn't always super popular with kids, or some, more kids maybe struggle with it?
Well, for me, and I already shared my anecdotal evidence, but it made it to where it was safe to ask those kinds of questions. My parents never shied away from math. They never said we're not math people, or I was never any good at math. So when math came up in a formal setting, I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't worried about it. I was ready to take on a challenge. There was nothing that had been drilled into my head otherwise before I had started school, or as I was going through school, even when my parents couldn't do the thing that I was doing. Yes, they were engineers, but there's some math that once you stop using it, you kind of lose it. And my parents got to that point. And the great part about that was that they said, I don't know, but let's figure it out together. And we got to sit down and we went through it together. And I got to see my parents struggle through the math like me. And instead of giving up and saying, just talk to your teacher in the morning, like we worked through it and we tried to find solutions. And this was pre-internet hysteria. So now parents can go online, they can watch a video, they can Google the topic that their child is working on. And I think there's value in having your child watch you learn about that thing and not being willing to back down or give up on it and say, just go to tutoring tomorrow morning, or, catch your teacher. And that's not to say that there's no value in going and getting the tutoring or going and reaching out to the teacher. But there is something to say about having your child watch you, being willing to be invested in this and not giving up.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so I guess for one thing I'm kind of curious about, for any eduleaders kind of out there who are considering writing a book of their own, how do you find the time to on top of, obviously you have 2 boys at home, you have a busy career. How do you find the time to write a book?
Yeah, that's been a question that a lot of people have asked me. It's a difficult one. My boys go to bed, or hopefully go to bed by 7:00. Yeah. So we do have, we play the game of bedroom chess because, I have to go to the bathroom and I want to drink water and the light isn't dim enough, or, it's too windy, or, all the different things. So boys go to bed at 7, they're down by 7:30. So I do have an advantage there, where I know some parents have kids up later, and that's fine as well. For me, it was kind of just, it worked out. The timing was good. My boys weren't both in sports at the same time late in the evening. And my wife is going back to school. She's getting her master's. So she's on the computer doing work, and I really didn't have a whole lot going on. So I had chunks of time that I could set out and do that. And so it really, an unfortunate situation where, for us in a relationship, we didn't get a lot of chance to talk, or we haven't had a chance to do that because of her schooling. It gave me a chance to find an excuse to sit down and write. And to be honest with you, the book in a way wrote itself, because it's a lot of stories and a lot of conversation. And because of how much I've invested into this community and the people who have supported me with it, it didn't take a whole lot of time to put those words down onto a Google Doc and send it off to Dave and Shelley Burgess.
Yeah. So what do you think have been some keys to, I guess, getting it launched effectively, as far as getting some attention to the book and just making it so you have a successful launch?
Good question. I actually read a book called Launch that is all about launching a business. And one of the things that he talks about in there is the idea of building a list. And so I have a website called tabletalkmath.com that parents can go to, and they can sign up for a free weekly newsletter. And in that newsletter, it's just one prompt, the one that I'm going to be sending out today. And so your readers will have your listeners have already had a chance to get it, is going to be talking about the weather and how we can use weather to start a math-based conversation. And that's it. It's one quick prompt that, hey, here's an idea that you may have thought about. I'm going to try to give you a little bit different perspective. So starting with the list, building that up. I am on Twitter. I'm actively involved in Twitter, so I was promoting it there. And also reaching out to some people close to me to be able to be the early readers on it, and then being able to share it out on their networks has helped. Going on and talking to you and having these great conversations has helped as well. So I think it starts with me being able to reach out to other people, and like I was talking about earlier, not being afraid of hearing the word no. Yeah,
I've as I've gotten older, I guess I've realized the value of showing up, just showing up and being willing to do things that other people aren't willing to do. And by that, I just mean, it's not that you're not afraid of reaching out. It's not that you're not afraid of rejection when you maybe reach out to somebody. It's just that you do it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I have nothing to lose. I sent some emails out to mommy bloggers. Apparently it's a big thing. Sent some emails out to mommy bloggers, and what's the worst that happens is they delete the email, and it wastes 45 seconds to a minute of my day. And I'm willing to make that investment and take that risk and see what happens. I'm going to be sending it out to some principals and seeing if they'd be willing to have a conversation. There's really no harm in sending that out, because I believe in the message. I believe in what I'm doing. And I believe that the people I'm reaching out to, it's not just a sales opportunity, but a chance to help impact the people around them.
Yeah, well, definitely. I am excited about checking out this book, and I'll make sure to put in the show notes how people can find it. Is there maybe could you provide maybe just one interesting kind of fun fact about your book or the process of creating the book?
Well, the cover itself, I'm quite proud of. I helped design it, and virtually every element of the cover speaks to a part of me and a part of who I am. And you can go on my blog and read all about it, but the background itself for the cover is a serving tray on my counter, one that I created out of walnut, and kind of a little hat tip nod to my side hobby as a woodworker. So, just like I brought all kinds of personality and personal impact to the inside of the book, I also wanted to do the same thing for the outside and the cover of the book.
Well, that's fun. Now I'm eager to go check out the cover.
Yeah.
Well, so EduLeaders can sign up. You have a free newsletter, right, that helps support math fluency at home?
Absolutely. Tabletalkmath.com. It'll be a pop-up that allows you to subscribe to the newsletter and be able to go from there.
Right. And isn't there a chat that you moderate on Twitter as well?
I do. That's disjointed from the book. It's called California Ed Chat, or hashtag CA Ed Chat, every Sunday night at 8 o'clock Pacific. A whole bunch of California-based educators, and really educators from around the country, gather and share ideas and resources about pushing this profession forward, whether it's from a teacher's perspective or a leader's perspective, coming together and trying to change the world.
Awesome. I'll make sure to put that in the show notes as well. So I'm going to roll through a couple rapid fire questions if you're ready for those.
Hold on, let me stretch. All right, we're good.
Here they
go
come.
for it.
All right. Yep. So first off, what would you say is the best leadership advice that you've ever received?
Oh man, you said this is rapid fire, so I got to come up with something quick, and I'm stalling. Yes, and being able to say yes to something and then build off of it.
Yeah. What would be an example of that?
Are you willing to take on this project to help these teachers build a lesson about adding fractions? And for me, I would say yes, and I would be more than happy to come in and co-teach that lesson or build some lesson ideas and resources for and with that teacher.
So kind of going the extra mile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So what would you say is your biggest strength as an educator?
I think I've already mentioned it, but not being afraid of taking risks and being willing to put myself out there and make myself look silly if I need to. But really it's about taking that risk and not being afraid of hearing the word no, as long as what I'm doing is something that I truly believe in. And I believe that it's something that'll potentially make a difference.
So obviously the Classroom Chef and then Table Talk Math are awesome books that have made a big impact on you and your life, of course. But in your own personal journey, is there maybe a book or two that have made a really big impact on you?
Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Really, I'm a huge fan of all of Gladwell's work, and just the ideas of having a different outlook on things. Gladwell, I don't know if you've read Gladwell's work, but the things that he brings in, you see something and he offers a completely different perspective on it. And that whole concept has led me to question and be inquisitive about virtually everything and not taking things at face value.
So what advice would you have for a teacher or a school leader as far as working with their students?
I would say that they would need to create a safe space where students feel like they can take a risk. We provide kids a classroom, we provide them seats, and we provide them instruction. Oftentimes we forget some of the most important pieces, which are the relationships and the relationships that matter. Being able to talk with students and learn with students and showing the vulnerabilities as a leader, coming in and sitting down and sitting through part of a lesson. I know that the site leaders are busy and they've got a lot of stuff going on, but giving them a chance to get into a classroom and be present and engage in that lesson with the students, I think is invaluable.
So kind of along those lines, what one piece of advice would you have for a school leader as far as working with the teachers, especially, and we've kind of touched on this earlier, but especially those who maybe are a little bit more resistant to new ideas or change?
For us, it's providing time. And I don't know how it is all across the board for our teachers who are resistant. It's not that they don't want to try things. It's that the time that it takes to sit down and learn the things and really see the value in them is restricting them from making that change. So whether it's a release day, or maybe it's just a period of sub coverage, or sending them to a conference, investing the time in the teachers to be able to see and sit down with them and really analyze what is it that teacher or group of teachers is doing, and how could we push that forward. We, as in the education field, we don't get a whole lot of time to reflect on what we do and how we do it. We're forced to just keep pushing along, and our test scores dictate how we're doing in the field. And that's such an unfair analysis of our impact as an educator. But what are we doing other than that? Are we doing, other than evaluations that happened every so often, what are we doing to reflect on our practice, and what kind of time is being afforded to those teachers to be able to do so?
I love what you touched on early in what you just said there, in that I think, what probably helps people not be as resistant to change, especially we're talking about adults here. I mean, these are teachers, they're educators, and they deserve respect for what they're doing and kind of, what they're going through each day, just teaching the classrooms. And so just taking the time to help them see the why, like not just kind of shoving stuff down their throat and saying like, I want you to implement this change, boom, just because I said so, but helping them understand why and the reasoning behind it. And you kind of touched on that earlier, but I feel like that's such a valuable component to, countering or approaching resistance from other people. And it probably alleviates a lot of resistance if they just understand why you want to do this.
Yeah. I mean, that's true in hopefully everything that we do. Hopefully we don't just blindly accept things, and that we question and we think about it, we reflect on it, and we're given explanations for things. We do that in our regular lives, but in education, sometimes it just gets so busy that we just need to push this out and accept it. So as a leader, being able to provide that space, provide that window of time for a teacher to understand the why and really get into it, I think would help a lot of different scenarios.
Yeah. Well, so the last question I have, if you had a time machine and you could jump in it and go back to the point in time when you first made the decision to go into education, what advice would you go back and give to that younger version of yourself?
Give yourself permission to not be perfect. I just wrote a blog post because of somebody putting out on Twitter, and a friend of mine, it's towards the end of the year. The push is here. We've got paper chains are out and people are counting it down. And I think part of it is this perception that teachers always have to be on their A game. And for me, I was beating myself up. I didn't have formal teaching credential experience until my third year of school, until my third year of teaching. So it was one of those things where I was trying to be perfect every day, and I would go home and like, why are all of my students not buying in? And it was a really big stressor for me. So once I realized that it's okay to not be amazing every single day, as long as my students know that they are cared for, they're cared about, and they have a safe space to learn, then I can build from there. If those are missing, then I need to go back to the drawing board. But I had to give myself permission to have a bad lesson every now and then. And, if I messed up, how I taught something, I had to be okay with coming back the next day and saying, you know what, guys, gals, class, I messed up yesterday and I want to be able to make it up to you. So today I'm going to try better. I'm going to be better. I'm going to do better.
So how do you think giving yourself that permission has helped you?
It's allowed me to let go of some of those things. And I'm a person who dwells on the negative. I could have had a great day with 164 of my students, but 2 of them, they didn't get it, or they were having an off day. And I had to after my second, maybe third year of teaching, I had to realize that I had 97% of my class had a great day today. And I have to be okay with that sometimes. I'm still going to go back. I'm still going to check on those 2 students who today wasn't for them. But I had to let myself be okay with less than 100% satisfactory rate.
Yeah, and that probably is liberating, right? And allows you to be more relaxed and probably more effective by being more relaxed when you're actually teaching.
Yeah, it was, I wasn't dwelling on all the negative, and, we have a lot of negative stuff that happens at school that's outside of our control, and it's outside of the school. A lot of kids bring in extra baggage with them, and there are some things that we can change and some things that we cannot. So being able to come to terms with that allowed me to have a whole lot more fun, have a whole lot more positive outlook on my classroom, on teaching as a whole. And it made it to where I wanted to show up to work every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. We've talked about that several times throughout this. I feel like that's, maybe the theme of this podcast: be willing to fail, right?
Yeah.
Just be willing to kind of put yourself out there, and it's really okay. Like you find out you're not going to die, but by you being willing to take a chance, you're going to have a lot more success than you would if you just sat there and allowed the fear or the worry about what other people think keep you from doing things.
Well, and as a parent, that's something that I'm going through right now. Like, I could try to be this perfect parent all the time, but I'm not. I'm not trying to be the perfect parent. I'm trying to be a good parent. I'm trying to be that role model for my kids, and that person that years from now they can look back on and say, yeah, he did things the right way. And I'm trying to take that into my role as an instructional coach, as a leader. I try to do it as an educator, but trying to model the success, but also modeling how to deal with when success isn't present.
Well, so finally, if one of our listeners wants to reach out to you after the show, I know I've mentioned, a couple websites, but what would be the best way to connect with you?
There's a lot of them. Probably the easiest ways are my Twitter handle is at jstevens009. And my email, you can reach out to me directly, is stevens009@gmail.com.
That's Stevens with a V, right?
Yes. Stevens with a V. They can also get to me through my website. Few of them, but 2 of them are fishing4tech.com and tabletalkmath.com.
EduLeaders, this has been a great interview today. For the show notes of today's show and other resources, visit educatorslead.com and type the word John into the search tool to find his show notes. John, thank you for sharing your journey with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure, and look forward to having some conversations based on this, and hopefully some of your listeners reach out.
All right, and that wraps up another episode of Educators Lead. This podcast is brought to you by Mometrics, the #1 test preparation company. Mometrics offers study materials for over 1,800 different exams, including the SAT, ACT, GED, end-of-course exams, state standard exams like the STAR, teacher certification exams, advanced placement, CLEP, ASVAB, GRE, and so many more. Mometrics takes the mountains of information students could be tested over for any given exam and boils it all down to just the fluff-free golden nuggets of information that are most likely to be on the exam. They couple that with some great study tips and test-taking strategies to help students maximize their test scores. With their interactive tutorial videos and a layout that makes lesson planning easy, Mometrics study guides, flashcards, and practice questions are a great fit for individual or classroom use. To learn more about our products and our vault of hundreds of free tutorial videos, please visit educatorslead.com/test prep. That's educatorslead.com/test prep. EduLeaders, thank you for joining us on Educators Lead. Visit us at educatorslead.com for everything we talked about today, free resources, and much, much more.